To make a scarf of 15 centimeters per 21 centimeters, we need 50 grams of this yarn. The recommended needle for this yarn is 4 millimeters, a 4.5 millimeters circular needles. It's better if you use a short cable, and scissors. I am using chunky yarn to show you how to make the stitches, and I am also using circular needles. We have to start making a slip knot. And we have to cast on 91 stitches. We have to cast on 91 stitches. You can use the way to cast on that you prefer. Before starting the first row, to be sure that all the stitches are to the center of the circle. All the stitches have to be on the same way. Now we start the first row. We have to make a knit stitch in all the stitches. On the first 2 or 3 stitches we have to take the 2 pieces of yarn to make a better join. We have to work the knit stitch in all this row. Work the knit stitch in all the row. Once we are at the beginning of the row, we are going to start with the first row of the repetition. You can use a stitch marker to know where is the beginning of the row, or a piece of yarn. We have to go the stitches in groups of 2. We have to make a knit stitch on the back loop of the second stitch. We don't move the stitches from the left needle, and we have to make a knit stitch in the first stitch. Once we have the 2 stitches done, we have to move the stitches from the left needle. We are going to work with the next 2 stitches. We repeat the same. We have to work a knit stitch on the back loop of the second stitch. Take the yarn to the front and work a knit stitch in the first stitch. Then we have to remove the stitches. We have to remove the 2 stitches from the left needle and repeat again the same with the next 2 stitches. Make a knit stitch on the back loop of the second stitch. Take the yarn to the front and work a knit stitch also in the first stitch. And we have to repeat the same to the end of the row. we have still one stitch before the marker. In this case, it's better to use a piece of yarn because I have now to move the first stitch, remove the marker and place again the stitch to the left needle. And now we are going to start with the second row of the repetition. We have to work again the stitches in groups of 2. We have to knit the second stitch, we don't change the stitches of the needle, and we have to work the knit stitch on the first stitch. Once we have the 2 stitches on the right needle, we can remove the 2 stitches from the left needle. Repeat the same with the 2 next stitches. Knit the second stitch and knit the first stitch, and once we have the 2 stitches on the right needle, we can remove the stitches from the left needle. Repeat again. Knit the second stitch and then knit the first stitch. We have to repeat the same to the end of this row, where we find again the piece of yarn. Once we are again at the end of the row, we still have 1 stitch. We have now to repeat the first row of the repetition. Remember how to make the first row of the repetition. We have to work again the stitches on groups of 2. We have to make a knit stitch on the back loop of the second stitch. Take the yarn to the front and work a knit stitch on the first stitch. Repeat again. Work a knit stitch on the back loop of the second stitch. Take the yarn to the front and work a knit stitch on the first stitch. Repeat one more time. Make a knit stitch on the back loop of the second stitch. Take the yarn to the front and work a knit stitch on the first stitch. And we have to repeat the same to the end of this row. And once we are again at the end of the row, we have to repeat now the second row of the repetition. Remember, we have to work the knit stitch on the second stitch and work the knit stitch on the first stitch. Work the next 2 stitches. Work a knit stitch on the second stitch and work a knit stitch on the first stitch. And we have to repeat the same to the end of this row. And we are going to repeat those 2 rows to have more or less 20 centimeters. If you want to make this scarf bigger, you can cast on more stitches, always an odd number of stitches, and repeat more rows to have the size that you want. Once you have the scarf on the size that you want, you only have to bind off the stitches. Remember how to bind off the stitches. We have to knit one stitch, knit the second stitch, and pass the first stitch over the second stitch. And repeat the same. Knit one stitch and pass the first stitch over the second stitch. And we have to repeat the same to bind off all the stitches. And once we bind off all the stitches, we only have to cut the yarn and fasten off. This is not an elastic stitch, so you have to take care to cast on and bind off the stitches with no pressure.